on this episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
In my position, for example, as the CEO of the company, the relationship that we have with patients is somewhat vicarious, right? I mean, I think that the patient care is delivered by our dentist, by our hygienists. And so in order to ensure the patient care is optimized and patients are receiving the very best care possible, you have to make certain that the dentist and the hygienist also feel like they are being treated as well as they possibly can be. Throughout, we work very hard to make certain that there's never any sort of intrusion into the clinical realm by the business realm, but to also ensure that there's very tight partnership so that to the extent this collaboration is necessary, it's always happening. And I think that's served us very, very well.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, episode number 462. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for being with us today. We have a really great episode for you. I'm, as you know, very partial to DSOs, but I think one of the obvious issues that I think that can happen in bigger organizations is they lose their mission, they lose their purpose, their drive. And you know what? That's not even to say that it happens in only big organizations. I've seen plenty of small offices, single office operations do the same thing where they've lost what the expectation is for them. They lost the drive to do excellent dentistry. They've lost the drive to go the extra mile, or maybe they just never started with it. Maybe they never had any mentors or coaching or anything like that. And, you know, it's just what happens in life. And I think when we talk about organized dentistry specifically, or DSO specifically, there's a huge kind of visceral reaction sometimes that people have. And I don't think that is necessarily warranted. And so in this particular episode, I know of a particular DSO, Sage Dental. They, in my opinion, are doing it right. They're doing really good things. As a clinician myself, it's more of a, are you taking care of your providers? Are you giving them the right tools to survive? Are they giving you the right products and the right education and the right training and the right support? And so when I see organizations like this, I obviously want to really highlight them, because a lot of us are looking for our next step in life, our next leadership position, our next whatever. Maybe we're just not happy at our offices. And I don't want people to think that they can't turn to a DSO as an option. And so there are plenty of companies just like Sage doing really great things, doing it right. And so we brought on Tom Marler to talk a little bit about, like, where did they come from? How did they start it? How are they implementing office culture? Who's leading the charge for the clinicians? And so we learn about a lot of that kind of stuff today. And then next week, we have another great show for you. It's still kind of up in the air which episode we're going to air, so I'm not going to be able to tell you and tease what that one is going to be yet, but we have plenty of good ones to choose from. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate a rating or review, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. If there's anything that we can do for you, make sure you hit us up. Email Andrew at ataleoftwohygienists.com. If you have suggestions for people that we can get on, or topics that you want us to cover, happy to do so. But with that, enjoy the interview with Tom Marler.
A tale of two hygienists.
All right, listeners, welcome into the interview portion of the podcast. We're joined today by Tom Marler. Tom, thank you for making time for us today.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to this too. I think, our listeners, we've had the podcast for almost 10 years now, and they've witnessed this DSO journey with me for most of it. I get excited when someone's doing it right. And I was telling you ahead of time, like this, there's not that many DSOs out there, in my opinion, in my very ignorant opinion of things, that is absolutely killing it the way you all are doing it. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into the story a little bit, what you all are doing and things like that. But I think before we get into that, I would love to get to know you. What is your background? How did you get into dentistry and DSO space and leadership and kind of that picture?
Sure. Well, I sort of fell into this industry almost by accident. My background really is telecommunications. So I graduated from college and then went into telecommunications in California. And then I found my way to Florida in the wireless industry, where I ran a wireless startup that ultimately became part of Verizon Wireless, and we were headquartered in Tampa. I left that and briefly went into venture capital with Lazard in Washington, D.C., did that for a bit, also focused on telecom. And then had an opportunity. I was introduced to a founder of one of the DSOs here in Florida by someone who at that time was working as his head of human resources. I had an opportunity to join that company, and I thought it was going to be a really interesting opportunity. So it's an opportunity to learn an entirely new field and do some really interesting things. And so I jumped at the chance to do that and did that for the better part of 12 years or so. And we did a lot of really interesting things there. And I think I made a lot of progress with regard to that company, grew that somewhat, created a dental lab as part of that, which ultimately we spun out and did well with that. I left that company to become the CEO of a DSO headquartered in Texas. Did that for a while, and then was recruited to join Sage in 2018. So I've been here since then, since middle of 2018. So just a little bit more than 6 years. And it's been a very different than telecom, but I think, my background in telecom was very tech oriented. And so I've enjoyed, especially at Sage, as we've been able to really orient the business toward a technology focus in the service of patient care. And I think so far we've found that to be a very rewarding experience for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the buzz about Sage though is that you guys are always willing to try at least the new thing, and that's really exciting to hear. There's got to be though kind of an overarching similarity though between your telecom days and being a leader in a DSO like DSO world. When you're thinking about like establishing culture, was there a similarity there, or is this really completely two different fields?
Certainly a similarity, I think, with regard to things like focus on metrics and assessing performance and really trying to find a way to motivate your team to achieve whatever is the objective you're trying to achieve. I think that, the telecommunications industry, certainly when I was there, had an extraordinary volume of data and metrics. So it was fairly straightforward to sort of assess how you were doing. And you learned very quickly, I think, how to utilize those metrics to sort of lead your team to achieve whatever the strategic initiatives are that you're trying to achieve. So I think that in that respect, what we tried to do at Sage is comparable to that. I think that what's different about dentistry generally, right, is that in order to succeed in this industry, because in my position, for example, as a CEO of the company, the relationship that we have with patients is somewhat vicarious, right? I mean, I think that the patient care is delivered by our dentist, by our hygienists. And so in order to ensure the patient care is optimized and patients are receiving the very best care possible, you have to make certain that the dentist and the hygienist also feel like they are being treated as well as they possibly can be. And so everything is somewhat indirect. And so in that spirit, you really learn very quickly that you've got to focus your attention on ensuring that you've got, frankly, sort of very highly motivated and satisfied provider base. If you ultimately want to have a very satisfied patient base, and so I think that's what we focused on here.
But I guess not to be too granular with it, but like, how do you achieve that though? Because I feel like you can roll the dice and say, hey, I'm going to hire this provider who's very capable, that has all of the degrees and all of the things behind their name, that's going to do the job that I asked them to do, and then you put them into a situation, and then they can either perform or not perform. There's got to be more to that you all are doing to maybe get them to achieve or get them to get to that next level and provide the right type of care.
Well, I think part of that gets down to the selection process, right? I mean, I think that we're very thoughtful, or try to be at least very thoughtful about who it is we recruit to join the company. We've got a very rigorous process for identification of candidates for our clinical roles, and a similarly rigorous process for evaluating and hiring those individuals. I think that, what we try to do is identify individuals who are effectively simpatico with what we're trying to achieve, right? I mean, so we look for providers who are going to be excited about the opportunities to utilize new technologies, excited about the opportunities to launch new clinical initiatives, excited about the opportunities to find ways to really deliver an extraordinary patient experience by virtue of the new tools and capabilities we're going to provide them. And that's frankly not for everybody, right? I mean, if you take a look at what we've done, we've been very aggressive, for example, in the utilization of artificial intelligence, right? I mean, we've deployed AI in all of our practices. And so I think the challenge with regard to AI is that it's one thing to deploy it everywhere. It's an entirely different thing to ensure that it's adopted everywhere. And we've really oriented ourselves to ensuring that we have sort of widespread adoption. And part of that is making certain that the providers that are treating the patients, the treating both dentists and hygienists, feel like you're utilizing AI in the right way, right? Really using it in a way that it promotes patient care, as opposed to using it in a way that would supplant clinical judgment. And I think that, we've done a very good job, in my view, under the direction of Dr. Cindy Rourke, who's our Chief Clinical Officer, under the direction of Misty Mattingly, who's our Chief of Dental Hygiene Operations. I think we've done a great job of ensuring that. And so I think that's all sort of part of it, right? Just making sure that the providers feel very comfortable that as we deploy these new things, we're not doing it in a way that will in any way sort of supplant them or supersede their judgment.
You bring up so many really important points there. Tell me about the mid-level leadership, because I think, okay, so that we're going to deploy AI, we're going to deploy a new strategy for X, Y, or Z, or a new product that we're going to bring into the company. At what level is that kind of mid-level leadership required for adoption and implementation?
Well, I think that you're not going to succeed with the deployment of anything, right, if you don't have the support of sort of the mid-tier management team. So in our case, the directors of market operations, and then other individuals in various support roles. We have been extraordinarily, I think, fortunate at Sage in the fact that we have an incredibly talented and dedicated group of individuals in those roles. I mean, if you've met anybody at Sage, you know that we've got just a really stellar group of folks. And I think that those are individuals who are as excited about the things that we're able to do as we are. And they bring that excitement in their roles as leaders of the respective markets. And I think they display that excitement in their conversations with and coaching of the staffs and the practices and the providers and the practices. And so they're critical to the role. I mean, I don't think that, one of the things that we pride ourselves on here is that our directors of market operations are genuinely directors of markets. And by that, I mean that we allow them to treat their respective markets as if they are their own business units. They're all somewhat unique. They run their business units somewhat uniquely as a result of that. They all have different styles and different focuses. We have a common set of objectives. Everyone has a business plan. How they achieve those may be, again, a bit different, but as long as they sort of adhere to a common set of sort of behaviors, I guess, or priorities with regard to how it is we treat people, then we can accommodate all kinds of different styles. And I think that's what we sort of serve the business well.
That's unique in that approach, because usually I feel like, especially, bigger businesses, that we want to just say this is the standard and we're all going to adhere to the same exact standard. Not necessarily, maybe standard is the wrong word, but like, this is how we're going to carry out our business across the company, and they don't allow for variation. I think that's really unique. Can you talk to us real quick? Because I think I'm very comfortable with this. I think a lot of our listeners, though, might not understand the difference between like a clinical team and like an operations team. And I'm not really sure how you all operate necessarily at Sage with those two units. Are they completely independent? Are they hand in hand? Are the clinical teams also operations teams? Like, how do you guys define those roles, and what are the responsibilities for each?
I would say that here it's a very close partnership. So if you take, for example, our hygiene team, which is led by Misty Mattingly, and then we have a number of regional hygiene administrators who work with Misty, they partner with respective directors of market operations, right, in the service of, again, promoting patient care and business performance in those respective markets. Similarly, we have the same kind of structure when it comes to the dentist side, the specialist side. And so throughout, we work very hard to make certain that there's never any sort of intrusion into the clinical realm by the business realm, but to also ensure that there's very tight partnership. So that to the extent this collaboration is necessary, it's always happening. And I think it's served us very, very well.
I feel like this particular podcast is probably going to catch the ears of many people. It's going to mostly be our hygiene audience, of course, but I think there's going to be some people in the DSO world that are going to be listening. I'm hopeful that we could talk a little bit about the rebrand. Were you a part of the rebrand when you came on board, or was it already Sage and everything was established when you came on board?
I mean, it actually predated me by a bit. It occurred a couple of years before I joined. And so, Sage actually was established a little bit more than 25 years ago as Gentle Dental. It was sort of the Sage at that time had the Gentle Dental franchise, if you will, the Gentle Dental brand in South Florida. So Miami-Dade and Broward counties. And that's really, I think, the heart of the company. So the original Sage practices were located there. And 25 years ago, it was approximately 25 practices. As the company grew beyond that, certainly moved beyond those markets, they no longer had the right to use the Gentle Dental brand, for example, in Orlando and Atlanta and so on. And so it became necessary to change the brand. And so the company evolved to the Sage Dental brand. And we rebranded everything so that we had one of the hallmarks of this enterprise is consistency and commonality. And so we have a common brand for all practices, even practices that we ultimately acquire the Sage brand. And consistent systems, common systems, and protocols throughout. So that's kind of how we developed the Sage brand and how we sort of propagated it throughout the enterprise.
Other than just being able to move into new territories, new regions, et cetera, is there also other advantages for rebranding? I'm thinking more about the people that are in the DSO space that are like, you know what, either we need to rebrand or we need our providers to not be scared of a rebrand if we're choosing to do that. Is there something advantageous about also rebranding?
Well, I think so. I mean, there's really two different schools of thought, right? I mean, there are those who believe strongly that a common brand can be disadvantageous and convey certain sort of points of view to patients that are unhelpful, right? You kind of get this notion of sort of corporate dentistry and the implication being that the quality of dentistry is therefore inferior. The flip side of that, of course, is that if you are confident, right, in the quality of care that you're providing to patients, and you're confident that you're maintaining sort of a progressive perspective with regard to the utilization of new technologies and new clinical protocols, then I think having a common brand provides some assurance to patients that if I go to that particular practice, I'm always going to receive this really high quality care. Right? And it's always going to be the same. And I think that that's certainly our view, right? We want our patients to know that if I go to a Sage Dental practice in Fort Lauderdale, I'm going to receive the same very, very high quality care that I'm going to receive if I go to a Sage Dental practice in Atlanta, if I go to a Sage Dental practice in Nashville, what have you. And I think that, again, has served us quite well. And I think, the real challenge for us has been, we've grown quite a bit. When I joined the company, we had 59 practices. So as we sit here today, we have 134. And we've grown largely through a combination of de novos and acquisition. It was about a 50-50 split. So we've acquired a substantial number of practices over the course of really since COVID. So call it the last, say, 3 years. And in the course of doing that, every practice we've acquired, we've ultimately rebranded. And in some cases, those practices have had their own sort of brand identity in the market. And so taking a practice that's established with a brand identity and converting it to Sage carries with its own risks. And what we've been able to do is to demonstrate to the patients who were patients of the practice prior to the acquisition, that by making that change, we're also introducing new things. We're not simply putting a new badge on the door, putting a new brand on the, above the door, but rather introducing new capabilities into the practice that maybe didn't exist there formerly, new clinical technologies, or for example, an entirely new hygiene program. One of the first things we do in every practice we acquire is bring our Sage hygiene program into the practice. And we have found that to be an extraordinary success everywhere we've done it. And so when patients sort of see the brand change, but also the nature of what's provided to them improve to a certain extent, they become very, very receptive to that change.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of leaning into the de novo versus acquisition. So for listeners who are maybe not in this space, de novo basically is like a startup of sorts. And are there particular reasons why you'd lean into de novo, reasons why you'd lean into an acquisition? Is it just happen chance that the right person approached you at the right time? How do you look at the market? And then also beyond the actual practice itself, I mean, regionally, are there very specific benchmarks that you're all looking for kind of regionally in your strategy to grow and expand?
There are. I mean, I think the way we think about it, the way we think about expansion, I mean, our objective is not so much to develop practices, but rather to develop markets. And so, we move into a market with the expectation that we're going to create a critical mass of practices in that market so that we maintain a sufficient presence so that the practices can support themselves and so that we can support the range of dentistry that we want to support. And by that, I mean that, Sage practices were conceived along this notion of all dentistry one place, meaning that we provide not only general dentistry and hygiene, but the full suite of specialties provided by dental specialists. And so we do everything, right? And so we want to make sure that we have enough practices where we can do that. And so when we think about that, we think about the fact that we want to launch a market. We've thought a lot about over the last few years, how do we best do that to ensure the success of the practices and ensure that we are providing, again, the best care to the patients? And we've arrived upon this strategy where we typically move into a market by first acquiring some small number of practices that allow us to establish a foothold in that market. And then we complement those practices with a set of de novos so that we can round out the footprint. That's how we developed the Orlando market originally. That's how we, to a certain extent, developed the Atlanta market as well. And so I think that has been sort of the overriding sort of method for growth for us. And if we do it right, and if we apply the logic around the acquisitions correctly, you end up with a set of practices at the end that are sufficiently consistent between the de novos and the acquisitions that it's almost as if you built them all in the first place. We have very strict criteria about what it is we will acquire. We want to make certain that every practice we acquire is sufficiently close to the Sage standard, if you will, that it could have been a Sage practice from the outset. And we've been very fortunate thus far in being able to achieve that.
You look around at some of the giants in the DSO industry with their many, many hundreds and even thousands of practices. And then I look at someone like, a Cindy Rourke or a Misty Mattingly, and I'm like, how do you leverage them enough without burning them out? Is there a critical mass of, potential numbers of offices until you have to get another Misty Mattingly, if that doesn't exist? We all know that, but you know what I mean? Is there a number that's like the right sweet spot that we're looking for?
Well, I think that our approach to this has been to sort of build, I guess, a support team, create the layers of team necessary to support the expansion, to make scalability possible. So, the team that we have in place now is substantially different, more expansive, more capable, candidly, than the team we had when we had 59 practices, because we've added some stellar players. So when I first joined, and Misty was one of the first folks who joined me here, and it was just Misty. Misty was hygiene for Sage. Well, now Misty has a very frankly sophisticated and incredibly talented team working under her direction. And that will continue to grow. And eventually there may be layers underneath that. And so that's been sort of how we've approached it. Dr. Rourke has the same, right? So in fact, we got we're really excited. We've got some additional folks who'll be joining us here in early 2025 that are going to be just remarkable, I think, in terms of continuing to sort of complement that team. So I think as we do that, the challenge so much isn't, I think, burning people out. It's so much of if I talk about hygiene for a second, so much of our success, in my view, really is been sort of Misty's personal contribution to the hygiene program here. And I can't say enough good about Misty. She's phenomenal. And I think that the bigger we become, the more difficult it is to maintain that personal connection. I was just talking about this to one of my colleagues here last week. We have to work very, very hard to make sure that we don't become too distant from the practices themselves, or else it becomes very hard to ensure that the culture that we've worked hard to build, we can maintain. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things we work through.
It's I don't want to say it's an uphill battle, but it's a very difficult thing to maintain as you continue to grow. I do want to talk a little bit more about hygiene as we're kind of like wrapping this up a little bit. You do have we just had Alex on the show, amazing hygienist in South Florida. We really appreciate how much you're leaning into it. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit to maybe like dispelling the myths or the rumors that, working in organized dentistry as a dental hygienist is not like really the career path. And I want to get your thoughts on starting your career. Is working in, obviously Sage would be a great landing spot for lots of people, but is organized dentistry a good landing spot for new grads that are for hygiene?
As opposed to, say, private practice?
Private practice or, public health or some of the other options.
In my view, yes, but I think you have to be somewhat selective about that. But I think, I encourage folks to come to Sage in large part because of the level of support that they are going to receive. I mean, if you have a passion for patient care, and frankly, most of the successful hygienists that I've met and come to know genuinely do. I mean, they really have a passion for it. If you have a passion for it, then it seems to me that you want to work in an environment that shares that passion and will equip you with what you need so that you can actually live that passion. And we'll do that. And I think, we one of the benefits, I think, of a company of scale, and we're certainly not the largest by any stretch, but we're sizable enough that we can provide the latest and greatest capabilities. And again, I've wrote this a few times, the tools, so that if this is something you want to do, you're going to be able to do it in the right way here. And we're going to be able to ensure that we're always on the leading edge of whatever the next sort of iteration of technology or evolution happens to be. You're less likely, I think, to get that. And you may find a private practice that provides that, but I think it's less likely. And so I think that if you come to a place like Sage, you're going to be able to really realize what it is you want to achieve clinically. And because of that, if other objectives are important to you, for example, your financial success and such, you're probably also going to realize that too. You're going to realize your objectives in that regard as well.
I think the level of support is just so unique, honestly. I feel like I was just amazed listening to Alex chat recently and then hearing you talk too. I think the level of support, especially for new graduates, is so valuable. And I think that's just so unique.
Yeah, we think so. I mean, we've all of us here, right? We're all DSO veterans. And so we come from lots of different places. And so we've learned a lot of really good things. And we've learned a lot of things that, hey, if we had a chance to do it differently, we might do it differently next time.
Yeah.
And so we're all here kind of trying to live that out.
We're really grateful for your time. We know how busy you are. If someone want to check out what Sage is doing, what's the best place for them to go to?
Well, if you'd like to join our team, start by looking at our career site and then reach out to any of us. We're pretty easy to get a hold of. We'd be happy to tell you a lot more about our company. We're very proud of it.
Tom, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.